Yeah, if it sounds like my nose is giving the YouTube talk today, it's because I am mad sick. I shouldn't even gotten up off the bed today. But alas, we got big things to talk about, just like, you know, the universe and the purpose of life. So let's make haste, no time to waste. I read a book called The Book on the Taboo Against Knowing Who You Are by Alan Watts. You know how most religions have some kind of a book like the Bible or the Quran or something to help pass down the secrets of the universe to generation after generation? Well, this is the book that Alan Watts said he would want to write to explain the secrets of the universe to his kids. And instead of making it all symbolic and difficult to read and interpret, he wanted to try and put it in as clear of language as possible. Which, is still pretty difficult to understand. But don't worry guys, I'm here to be the Cliff Notes, you know, your cheat sheet, and I'll help summarize this all for you. So essentially, the thesis that Alan Watts was getting at, or the taboo, if you will, is that we are all connected, every human to every animal, to all aspects of nature, to the universe, and all of these things are an expression of God. And so in a way, this makes us God-like. So I guess Kanye was right when he said, I am a god, so hurry up with my damn massage. Get the Porsche out the damn garage. Yeah, it's not often Kanye gets stuff right, but in this case, Alan Watts would support Kanye's thesis. Now, I myself personally don't really like the term God because I don't believe in it, but I still think that concept is an interesting one, right? If you replace the word God with like universe or nature, or understanding that, hey, as humans, we are all composed of atoms, and these atoms break down into little parts after we die, and they get built up into different things after we're gone, then you can start to understand how, yeah, maybe we are all sort of composed of the same thing. Do you feel? This isn't necessarily a novel concept, right? Alan Watts even mentioned himself that he lifted this concept from the Vedanta school of Hindu philosophy, but he did give this really cool, like, imagery story that comes from Hinduism, which essentially went like this. He's like, okay, imagine, right? like a SpongeBob, like imagination. Imagine that really what this earth is, what this universe is just God playing one giant game of hide and go seek with himself, right? Because God gets bored. What's God gonna do? God's just gonna chill over here and be like, I'll do nothing for eternity. No, that's boring. So what God does is he disguises himself as every single thing in this universe, including nature, including items, including humans, and then the whole part of this game of hide and go seek is to realize at the end of it that we aren't actually all these individual egos, we're actually all the same thing. Boom! You found him. No, but Alan Watts essentially says there's a big difference between theoretically understanding this concept and really getting it. And so his whole point of the book is to try and get you to really understand that concept by the end. And so he does this by first comparing humans to tubes. Like little pieces of macaroni. He says essentially all we are as humans are just tubes that put things in one end and let things out another. And he says essentially these tubes, when they get bored of being tubes, will pair up with other tubes and make little mini baby tubes, and then those tubes will grow, and we keep putting things in one end, letting them out the other, and sometimes we form into tube groups, and then these tubes fight the other tubes, and there's always a fight of who's going to be the most prominent tube, and then sometimes we create appliances that we attach to ourselves or put around ourselves so that we almost become unrecognizable as tubes, but at the end of the day, that's all we are, is just tubes. So, like, really it's quite weird what we are. So that's the way he starts out the book, is essentially by saying, how freaking weird are we, and also how futile is our life? really, when you think about it. Because when you zoom out from that perspective, it's like, why would one tube ever be super important? It's all just part of this bigger pattern. But let me give you an example that's a little less like, woo, out there, and a little bit more relevant to probably your life. You have been hypnotized or conditioned by an educational processing system arranged in grades or steps, supposedly leading to some ultimate success. First nursery school or kindergarten, then the grades or forms of elementary school, preparing you for the great moment of secondary school. Woo! But then more steps, up and up to the coveted goal of the university. Here, if you're clever, you can stay on indefinitely by getting into graduate school and becoming a permanent student. Oh, that is not what I wanted. Otherwise, you're headed step by step for the great outside world of family raising, business, and profession. Yet, graduation day is a very temporary fulfillment. You got that right. For with your first sales promotion meeting, you are back in the same old system, being urged to make that quota. And if you do, they'll give you a higher quota. That's so real. And so progress up the ladder to sales manager, vice president, and at last, president of your own show, about 40 to 45 years old. In the meantime, the insurance and investment people have been interesting you in plans for retirement. That really ultimate goal of being able to sit back and enjoy the fruits of all your labors. But when that day comes, your anxieties and exertions will have left you with a weak heart, false teeth, prostate trouble, sexual impotence, fuzzy eyesight, and a vile digestion. Lovely. Because really, that is what our lives are. That is what the pattern is. So what does Alan Watts think he can do about it? Well, let's keep going on that page. He says, all this might have been wonderful if, at every stage, you had been able to play it as a game, finding your work as fascinating as poker, chess, or fishing. No, but that's the secret, is realizing that life is meant to be played as a game. But how many people do you know who do that? Actually. Right? Way too many people take life way too seriously. And then they die. Because that is the one fate that none of us can escape. Blah, blah. But when you're out there trying to live your best life, Alan Watts tries to say you should make a distinction between different types of pleasures because some are more superficial than others. He says, nevertheless, it strikes me more and more that America's reputation for materialism is unfounded. That is, if a materialist is a person who thoroughly enjoys the physical world and loves material things. In this sense, we are superb materialists when it comes to the construction of jet aircraft, but when we decorate the inside of these magnificent monsters for the comfort of passengers, it's nothing more but frippery. High-heeled, narrow-hipped, doll-type girls serving imitation, warmed-over meals. For our pleasures are not material pleasures, but symbols of pleasure, attractively packaged but inferior in content. So he basically says that, like, the Western world, more specifically America in this case, is getting used to pleasures that are purely symbols of pleasure, not actually pleasure itself. And that comes from kind of this desire to cut corners in order to make more money. He said that in the next paragraph. I didn't read that to you. We tend toward undervaluing actual quality things because we've been given this false belief that something else is meant to bring us pleasure. We notice this not just in physical objects, but in also the way we spend our time. So, for example, when you look at the way most people spend their time, it's like they'll work on a job that makes them miserable because they've been sold on this idea that that will give them money so that they can actually do what they want in that short amount of free time they have before the night's over or the weekend's done. And I'm not saying that's everybody, right? Some people have learned how to live life as a game. Some people have learned how to make things work for them and how to really take pure pleasure out of the experience. One more thing I need to say about learning how to take enjoyment out of life is learning how to recognize that every single good thing that happens to us is only good because it's taken in comparison to another. Usain Bolt's track success is so outstanding just because it comes in comparison to everybody else in the world. The reason you being good at juggling is so cool is because on average, most of us when we throw knives up in the air will like cut our fingers off, you know? When you realize that most things you do to make you better only make you appear better because they're in comparison to someone else, that's when you've really understood something interesting about life, right? That it's not just about good and bad, it's about two different sides of the same coin that like wouldn't exist without the other. So for example, one of the things that Alan Watts says is, for to love your enemies is to love them as enemies. It is not necessarily a clever device for winning them over to your own side. How can judges exist if they have no one to judge, right? We all rely on that flip side of the coin in order to exist as anything, right? And so this takes us back to the original thesis of the book, that we are all connected, right? Everything in the universe requires and is everything else in the universe. Like the example that Alan Watts gives is, think about a rainbow, right? A rainbow needs three things. It needs light, it needs water, and it needs someone at a certain angle to be able to view what's happening between the light and that water. If there's not anybody to view the rainbow, then the rainbow doesn't exist. So think about that in terms of the universe, right? If there's not somebody there with a brain to view the universe, would the universe exist, right? So one human is merely one of the lenses that the universe uses to peer at itself. I know this gets wild, right? Imagine how it must feel for me. I'm sick and I'm trying to describe all this right now. But what Alan Watts tries to say is, even though we are just one lens looking out at the infinite universe and we can only capture just a fraction of that within our own minds, there's still an infinite number of moments and instances we can see with our one perspective. And this is where it gets back to trying to appreciate every single moment of life, right? That's one of the purposes, that's one of the points of living, is we gotta learn how to take in everything that's coming at us and actually enjoy it. So because I've been giving you Alan Watts' words for everything, might as well in this scenario, huh? He says, if I ask what you did, saw, heard, smelled, touched, and tasted yesterday, I am likely to get nothing more than the thin, sketchy outline of the few things that you noticed, and of those, only what you thought worth remembering. But suppose you could answer, it would take me forever to tell you, and I am much too interested in what's happening now. How is it possible that a being with such sensitive jewels as the eyes, such enchanted musical instruments as the ears, and such a fabulous arabesque of nerves as the brain can experience itself as anything less than a god? And when you consider that this incalculably subtle organism is inseparable from the still more marvelous patterns of its environment, from the minutest electrical designs to the whole company of the galaxies, how is it conceivable that this incarnation of all eternity can be bored with being? Hoofda! This is heavy stuff! Heavy stuff, quite confusing, Alan Watts, for a book you said you would try and write in the most clear of languages. I think what the book's trying to get at then is, I mean, it's not supposed to be a prescription for life, but if it were, what it would be trying to say is that we all are part of something so vast that sometimes it can make us feel very minuscule, which we are. But also within our minuscule field of vision, we can make life vast again. Right, and that really is the godlike part of us. Quite cool, quite cool, quite cool. All right. Oh my God. Can I go back to sleeping on the bed now? I'm tired. That was a lot of work. I feel like that was a really long video, guys. Did we do it? It was a cool read. through my head for some loops. But yeah, if you want to read it as well, a good another philosophy book in this journey, go down below, click the link. And if you've held on this long, man, you must like something about me, so also go and check out my Instagram at yes or no. Hopefully it won't be a superficial pleasure. Bye.
No, no, no.